problems for the president-elect are the same as they were in the first administration, I would say. How do you staff this thing with people who are aligned with you? Right. And how do you keep the people who presently occupy every position of power, who operate the levers of power, how do you keep them from wrecking the project secretly?
Yeah. And the thing that's different is that the international situation that he's being left with is truly dire. And so there's no room for, kind of like, sort of a delay or
there's no look. I'm sorry, I don't want to start attacking people, but I just know everybody, as I know you do.
Well,
they have no. I mean, the people who want these jobs in the Trump, the second Trump administration, and they act like it's 1985. Like
that's the thing.
They have not updated their files. These are the dumbest people I think I've
has
ever
been great
met.
on this.
Yes,
like in the debate when he said to Pence,
why shouldn't he be Secretary of State?
I think Vivek would be an amazing. I mean, he's there. He was out hustling for the president. He's. I mean, we all say what time it is, but he delivered these memorable lines against Pence in that debate, and then he debated John Bolton, I think at VMI, and it was just like, it was a very human point. I saw the segment where he's just like, you grew up, and that's being generous, honestly, to John Bolton, frankly, but which so I admired Vivek on that point, but is said, you grew up in the era of Apollo 11, and I grew up in the era, and he's younger than I am, the global financial crisis, Iraq, failed wars, increasingly fractious society, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, nobody, there's a friend of mine who was interviewed in one of these stories about the new right and so forth, and he said, nobody under the age of 30 I know who's a conservative treats the neoconservative idea with anything but derision and scorn, something like that. And it was just like, I'm confident where things are heading, but we don't have time, because if China, and I'm not a fanatic on China, right? Like, my view on China is, and I think the Chinese understand this, my view is we need to be strong, but we also need, like in the Cold War, there's like a line, and we don't cross it, and we need to be able to decouple the thing, reindustrialize the things Lighthizer and Navarro and sort of are talking about, which is bring back industry, have more autonomy. But at the same time, there's a line, but we're not going to go and regime change them. There are people who served in the first Trump administration who are talking about regime change in China, who are talking about primacy over China, like dominating China. Like, that is so dangerous. And often they're the same people who are supporting, total support of Ukraine, which makes zero sense, right? So my view is, you got to do the things you're talking about, but you've also got to say, we got to, and Senator Vice President-elect Vance has made these points very well. Reindustrialization is critical, but it's going to take some time. In the meantime, given that the Biden team has used up so much of our weaponry and so forth, we got to husband what we have. And again, to me, that is with the purpose of not getting into wars.
Do you remember when Democrats used to refer to abortion as something that should be safe, legal, and rare? Well, they've changed their view on that. It went from a right to a sacrament. This isn't the pro-choice movement you may remember from 30 years ago. This is something much darker. And that's why we have joined forces with Preborn. They're a sponsor of the show and of our speaking tour, to do something about it. It's the largest pro-life organization in the United States. And they are doing what they should do, which is speaking up against this atrocity, killing babies after birth. No one seems to have the bravery to call that wrong, which it is, but Preborn is calling it out. Their networks of clinics are positioned in the highest abortion areas in the country, and they've rescued 300,000 babies. When a woman considering an abortion searches to end her baby's life, Preborn is there. The power of ultrasound combined with the love of God doubles the baby's chance of being born. A single ultrasound costs $28. 5 ultrasounds are $140, giving women the information they need to make the decision that many of them actually want to make, to have a baby. Any gift will help, and all gifts are tax deductible. To donate securely, go to preborn.com/Tucker or call pound 250 on your phone, and when asked, use the word baby. How long will the Wall Street Journal kind of be considered the preeminent place where, quote, conservative intellectuals explain their views?
I think they're actually in trouble, honestly. I read them, but they are so far out of whack. I mean, so on the kind of national security foreign policy issues, they are total premises. That in the same breath, often they'll say our military is in terrible shape, but we need to have aggressive policies in like 4 different theaters. It makes no sense. It's incoherent, right? They're way out of step on the conservative Republican views on like trade, where like Lighthizer and Navarro and the president are. They can't stand people. They've been repeatedly criticized people like you, like Vice President Vance. So I feel like I'm honored to be in this company. So it's sort of like, obviously they reflect a certain part of the, American population, which is sort of, wealthier professionals who are probably more socially liberal, the Acela Corridor, New York, et cetera. But I think a lot of people read them because they matter, right? But at some point, you get so far out of whack that you actually become a liability. And they were big backers of Nikki Haley and so forth. So, I think we need, but then with the rise of new media, I mean, you've been a pioneer in this, but others, and Elon and what he's done with X and, and David Sachs and these kind of people, I think there's hope that not only is it not going to matter as much, but it may become less and less relevant.
It seems like the Drudge Report to me, you have in your mind that this, Drudge went from, Drudge was of course sold to left-wingers. They've never admitted that, but I believe that's true. But the Wall Street Journal in some sense has been also, I don't know. People who imagine the Wall Street Journal is conservative are sort of haven't been paying attention.
It's like the socially liberal fiscal conservative.
Yeah,
and they were mocking President Trump in the interview. I thought that was pretty lame and kind of gross.
It's a really dishonest newspaper, and I'm rooting for its demise. I just want to say that. I mean that.
I hope it could get reformed, but
you're right. You're totally right. We've seen enough institutions destroyed. I do think it's really a garbage newspaper, and I wish more people realize that. I can't control myself. Sorry, out of control. So when do you think it'll be clear, who's administering Trump's foreign policy?
I mean, I honestly don't know. I mean, it's obviously up to him. But what I would say is, I hope he picks people who will implement the vision that he ran on, and that you and others have supported him so ably about. I just as sincerely as an American. I mean, even if I'm not part of it or I'm dog catcher or whatever, I mean that. I think if the primacist types who could get us into multiple wars get in there, you're going to have to get to a more realistic foreign policy eventually.
Well, they'll destroy Trump. To be clear,
destroy his administration.
People like Pompeo, whom I know personally, hate Trump. They hate Trump. And, I don't care what he says, or Lindsey Graham says, oh, he's so great. They suck up to him on Fox News, but they hate him. And they're working to undermine him. And they did throughout his 4 years in office, and the 4 years that followed. They undermined him because they hate him. So I just hope that there is a new generation in the Republican Party of people who maybe aren't even ideological, but just put
common sense. Yeah.
America's interest is the whole point of our government.
I think there is a new generation, people in their 20s and 30s. I'm very hopeful. I mean, I talk to a lot of them. What I'm worried about is I don't think there's any. I mean, you maybe and Trump is an exception. But, you look at a guy like Vice President Vance, he's only, I think, 40.
Yes.
A lot of the best senators, are much younger.
Yes.
When you look like Eric Schmidt.
Eric Schmidt is amazing.
Jim Banks, exactly. Younger guys. And the problem is people just naturally well, we need somebody who's 65 or whatever. And it's sort of but I think it's even worse than what you're suggesting, because let's say we get in a big Middle Eastern war. And you have people who are talking about an independent Taiwan, or regime change in China, or regime change in Russia, and we get bogged down. Why wouldn't the Chinese attack? Apply how we behaved, the Project for a New American Century style thinking, and just think that those people will be in the ascendancy in Beijing. The way I think about it, Tucker, is we're like a heavyweight boxer, and China's another heavyweight boxer. Russia's like a middleweight, and maybe North Korea and Iran are welterweights or featherweights or whatever. Those guys can tear you out, and China can call us to a match at any time. And if we're not ready, that is terrible, And so at that point, we would have to put a more realistic foreign policy. But my view, and this is, I think, a real point to the kind of people who read the Wall Street Journal op-ed page, the point that I would make to them is, if we go down this path of aggressive policies in 3 or 4 different theaters of the world without the backing, we will end up bloodied and bruised. We will have catastrophic defeat. Lots of Americans will be killed. And the American people may very well say, I'm done. This is, all the rules-based international order. This is what it led to. Forget about it. And that, if you want to save it, if you want to save something, I think mine is the reform rather than the radical upheaval. Mine is hey, no, I believe in the post-war. I just don't believe in the post-1989 absurd hubris going around. The people, the Cold War, and I keep going back to it, but just like, I just try, because like, Senator McConnell will talk about Eisenhower all the time. And I'm like, dude, Eisenhower thought that if there were U.S. troops in Europe at the end of the 1950s, it was a failure. He's the one who came up with the Uncle Sucker line, not President Trump. So you want to talk about the Cold War legacy? We were pretty ruthless. The Germans attacked us, or excuse me, sound like John Belushi. The Japanese attacked us in 1941, and we let the Soviets do the bulk of the fighting.
Exactly.
And we put Germany first. Why? And I'm glad, as a descendant of people who were in the European theater of operations, I'm glad that the Soviets, but George Shultz, when he went and dealt with his counterpart, he wrote about this very movingly. He went to the cemetery in Leningrad, and he offered a somber salute. And I had the honor to meet Shultz a couple times. And this was not he had strong views and so forth. But I think you can respect that, and understand that we can be hard-nosed and look at your opponents and say, we don't want a war.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. We hope you'll subscribe to it. And by the way, you can hit the little bell on there and get notifications every time we produce a video. We hope you'll do that also.